The blood on Dorothy Novak's hands would not wash away, no matter how hard she scrubbed them raw in the creek behind her family's homestead. And when she finally returned to the house that evening in September of 1878, her mother took one look at her trembling daughter and declared that no decent man would ever want a girl who had killed someone, even if it was in self-defense. Dorothy had been 21 years old for exactly 3 weeks when the drifter attacked her on the road from Deer Lodge, Montana. She had been returning from the general store with flour and sugar, riding the old mare that her father had left them before he died of pneumonia 2 winters past. The man had come out of nowhere, dragging her from the saddle, his hands rough and his breath reeking of whiskey. She had fought him with everything she had, and when her fingers found the rock beside the road, she had not hesitated. The sound of it connecting with his skull would haunt her for the rest of her life, but it was the silence that followed that truly terrified her. The awful, complete silence of death. She had run to the sheriff, of course. Sheriff Morrison had ridden out with her, examined the scene, and declared it justified. The man had been wanted in 3 territories for similar crimes, though his previous victims had not been so fortunate or so fierce. Morrison had told her she did what she had to do, that she should hold her head high. But when Dorothy returned home and told her mother what had happened, Margaret Novak had not embraced her daughter or thanked God for her safety. Instead, she had looked at Dorothy with something close to horror. "You killed a man," her mother had whispered, as if Dorothy might have forgotten in the hours since it happened. "You took a life with your own hands." "He was going to kill me, Mama, or worse." "I know what he was going to do," her mother had snapped, her face pale in the lamplight. "But you have blood on your hands now, Dorothy. Real blood. No decent man will want you now. You are marked by violence. What kind of wife would you make? What kind of mother? Men want gentle women, soft women. They do not want women who know how to kill." Dorothy had stood there in the small kitchen of their cabin, still shaking from fear and shock and the horrible weight of what she had done, and felt something inside her crack. Her mother was supposed to comfort her, to hold her, to tell her that everything would be all right. Instead, Margaret Novak had looked at her only daughter as if she were damaged goods, unsellable merchandise that would sit on the shelf gathering dust until it rotted away to nothing. That night, Dorothy had lain in her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to her mother crying in the next room. She did not know if her mother wept for her daughter's lost innocence or her lost prospects, and she was not sure which would be worse. When sleep finally came, it brought nightmares of dead eyes staring up at nothing and hands that would not come clean no matter how hard she scrubbed. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the first real bite of autumn in the air. Dorothy rose early, as she always did, and went about her chores with mechanical precision. She fed the chickens, collected the eggs, milked the cow, and tried not to think about anything at all. Her mother moved through the house like a ghost, speaking only when necessary, her mouth pressed into a thin line of disappointment. It was nearly noon when the rider came up the road. Dorothy was hanging laundry on the line, her hands still raw and tender, when she heard the horse approaching. She tensed instinctively, her heart hammering against her ribs, but when she looked up, she saw that it was not a stranger. It was Warren Easton, one of the cowboys who worked the massive cattle ranch that bordered their small property to the north. She had seen Warren around town, of course. Everyone in Deer Lodge knew the Easton Ranch. It was one of the largest operations in the territory, running thousands of head of cattle across the wild Montana grasslands. Warren was the eldest son of the ranch owner, but unlike some sons of wealthy men, he was known for working as hard as any hand on the payroll. He was 26 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. Dorothy had never spoken more than a few words to him, though she had noticed the way other girls in town looked at him when he rode past. He reined in his horse at the edge of their property and removed his hat, holding it respectfully in his hands. "Morning, Miss Novak," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the yard. Dorothy set down the wet sheet she had been holding and walked toward him slowly, aware that her mother had appeared in the doorway of the cabin watching. "Mr. Easton?" she said carefully. "What brings you out this way?" Warren swung down from his horse with easy grace, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. Up close, she could see that his face was serious, almost solemn. "I heard about what happened yesterday," he said quietly. "I wanted to make sure you were all right." Dorothy felt heat rise in her cheeks. Of course he had heard. Everyone in town would have heard by now. Sheriff Morrison might have declared it justified, but that would not stop people from talking. "I am managing," she said, keeping her voice steady. "What you did took courage," Warren said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up at him sharply. A lot of women would have frozen up, and then that drifter would have done what he came to do. You saved your own life. That is nothing to be ashamed of. Behind her, Dorothy heard her mother make a small noise of disapproval, but she kept her eyes on Warren. "My mother does not see it that way." Warren glanced past her at Margaret Novak, then returned his attention to Dorothy. "May I speak plainly, Miss Novak?" "I suppose you might as well," Dorothy said, suddenly tired. "Everyone else in the territory will be talking about me anyway." "I have been thinking about getting married," Warren said, and the words were so unexpected that Dorothy actually took a step back. "I have been running the ranch mostly on my own since my father took sick last spring. He is recovered now, but he is not as strong as he was, and he wants to see me settled before he passes on. I have been looking for the right woman, but most of the women I have met are too delicate for ranch life, or they are more interested in my father's money than in the work itself." Dorothy stared at him, completely unable to understand where this conversation was going. "Mr. Easton, I do not see what this has to do with me." "Yesterday you proved that you are not delicate," Warren said, and his blue eyes were direct and honest. "You proved that when life comes at you hard, you do not fold. You do what needs doing. That is exactly the kind of woman I need beside me. So I am asking you, Miss Dorothy Novak, if you would do me the honor of becoming my wife." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Dorothy heard her mother gasp behind her, heard the chickens clucking in their pen, heard the wind rustling through the grass, but all of it seemed very far away. "You are proposing marriage," she said slowly, needing to hear the words out loud to believe them. "To me, the day after I killed a man. I am proposing marriage to a woman who is strong enough to survive in this territory," Warren corrected gently, "and I am proposing it now because I suspect you need to hear that you are not ruined or damaged or unmarriageable. You are exactly the opposite." "You do not even know me," Dorothy whispered, but something in her chest was unfurling, something that felt dangerously like hope. "I know enough," Warren said. "I know you have kept this homestead running since your father died. I know you take care of your mother and the animals and the land all by yourself. I know you go to church on Sundays and you buy your supplies on credit and you always pay your debts on time. I know you are honest and hardworking and brave. If you are willing, I would like the chance to know the rest." Behind Dorothy, her mother spoke up, her voice sharp with suspicion. "This is very sudden, Mr. Easton. What exactly are you getting out of this arrangement?" Warren turned his attention to Margaret, and his expression remained respectful but firm. "I am getting a wife who will not faint at the sight of blood or hard work. I am getting a partner who can handle herself when trouble comes, and I am getting a woman who knows what it means to fight for what she loves. Those are valuable things, Mrs. Novak. More valuable than a pretty face or a dowry." "My daughter has no dowry. No," Margaret said flatly. "We have nothing to offer you." "I am not asking for anything but her," Warren said simply, and then he turned back to Dorothy. "I am not asking you to answer right now. I know this is unexpected, but I want you to think about it. I am offering you a real home, a partnership, and a chance to leave behind what happened yesterday. I am offering you a future." Dorothy found her voice, though it came out smaller than she would have liked. "Why are you really doing this?" Warren was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his words were careful and honest. "Because I watched my mother die when I was 12 years old. She was attacked by a mountain lion while she was out checking the fence line. She did not have a weapon with her, and she did not know how to fight. She died scared and alone, and my father found her hours later. I have spent the last 14 years wishing she had been stronger, tougher, more able to save herself. When I heard what you did yesterday, my first thought was not horror or disgust. It was gratitude. Gratitude that you were strong enough to survive. I want a wife who will survive. I want a wife who will fight. I want you. The silence that followed was heavy and profound. Dorothy felt tears pricking at her eyes, though she could not have said if they were tears of relief or confusion or something else entirely. This man, this near stranger, was offering her everything her mother had said she would never have. He was offering her not despite what she had done, but because of it. I need time to think, she managed to say. Take all the time you need, Warren said, settling his hat back on his head. I will come back tomorrow at the same time. If you say yes, we can ride into town and speak to Reverend Patterson. If you say no, I will respect your decision, and you will not be bothered by me again. He nodded to her, then to her mother, and swung back up into his saddle with the same easy grace. Good day, Miss Novak, Mrs. Novak. They watched him ride away, the sound of hoofbeats gradually fading into the distance. When he was out of sight, Margaret turned to her daughter, her face unreadable. That was the strangest thing I have ever witnessed. He wants to marry me, Dorothy said, still trying to process it. He wants to marry me because of what I did, not in spite of it. He is either mad or desperate, her mother said sharply. Men like Warren Easton do not marry poor girls from failing homesteads. There has to be something wrong with him that we do not know about. Or maybe he is telling the truth, Dorothy said. And she was surprised by the strength in her own voice. Maybe he actually means what he says. Maybe there is a man out there who does not see me as damaged goods. Her mother's face softened slightly, just enough to show the worry beneath the harshness. Dorothy, I only said what I did last night because I was afraid. I am still afraid. This world is not kind to women, and I thought that what happened would make things even harder for you, but maybe I was wrong. You were wrong, Dorothy said quietly. You told me no decent man would want me. And then a decent man came and proved otherwise. That night, Dorothy did not sleep. She lay in her bed and thought about Warren Easton, about his honest blue eyes and his strong hands and the way he had spoken about his mother. She thought about what it would mean to be his wife, to live on the Easton ranch, to work beside him every day. She thought about the alternative, staying here on the struggling homestead, watching her mother grow old and bitter, becoming an old maid who was whispered about in town as the woman who killed a man. The choice, when she really examined it, was not difficult at all. When Warren rode up the next day at noon, Dorothy was waiting for him in her best dress, her hair pinned up neatly, her hands clasped in front of her. She had washed them again that morning, scrubbed them until they were pink and tender, but she knew now that the blood she saw on them was not really there. It was only in her mind, and maybe, with time, and with Warren beside her, it would fade. I have an answer for you, she said as he dismounted. Warren's expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. I am listening. Yes, Dorothy said simply. Yes, I will marry you. She watched the tension drain out of him, watched a smile spread slowly across his face. It transformed him, made him look younger and lighter and impossibly handsome. You have made me very happy, Dorothy. May I call you Dorothy? I suppose you had better if we are going to be married, she said. And then she smiled too, because it felt absurd and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Warren reached out and took her hand, the gesture gentle and careful. His palm was calloused from years of ranch work, but his touch was warm. Then you should call me Warren. And if you are ready, we can ride into town right now and speak to the Reverend, unless you want to wait. I do not want to wait, Dorothy said, surprising herself with her certainty. I want to move forward. I want to start over. Then let us go, Warren said, and he helped her up onto his horse, settling her in front of him in the saddle. It was improper, riding like this, but Dorothy found that she did not care. Her mother stood in the doorway of the cabin watching them go, and for once there was something like approval on her face. The ride into Deer Lodge took less than an hour. The town was small but bustling, with a main street lined with wooden buildings and boardwalks. The general store, the saloon, the hotel, the blacksmith, and the church all stood in a row, facing each other across the dusty road. Warren tied his horse outside the church and helped Dorothy down, his hand steady on her waist. Reverend Patterson was a kind man in his 50s with graying hair and a gentle manner. He looked surprised when Warren and Dorothy walked into the church together, but he listened carefully as Warren explained what they wanted. "Marriage is a sacred covenant," the Reverend said seriously, looking between them. "It should not be entered into lightly or hastily. Have you known each other long?" "Long enough to know that she is the woman I want beside me," Warren said firmly. "And you, Miss Novak?" The Reverend turned his attention to Dorothy. "Are you certain this is what you want?" Dorothy thought about her mother's words, about the dead man on the road, about the blood that would not wash away. She thought about Warren's honest eyes and his story about his mother, and the way he had looked at her not with pity or disgust, but with respect. "I am certain," she said. The Reverend studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well, but I will not marry you today. The law requires that I post bans for 3 weeks, giving anyone with objections time to come forward. If no one objects, I will perform the ceremony a month from today. That will give you both time to be truly sure of your decision." Warren looked at Dorothy, a question in his eyes. She nodded. "A month is acceptable," she said. "Then it is settled," Reverend Patterson said, and he smiled at them both. "I will see you in 1 month, and we will join you together in holy matrimony." As they walked out of the church, Dorothy felt as if she were walking through a dream. 1 month. In 1 month, she would be Dorothy Easton, wife of a successful rancher, living in a real house with a real future ahead of her. It seemed too good to be true. Warren must have sensed her uncertainty because he stopped before they reached his horse and turned to face her. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. "I think I am overwhelmed," Dorothy admitted. "Everything is happening so fast." "We can slow down if you need to," Warren said immediately. "I do not want you to feel rushed or pressured." "No," Dorothy said quickly. "No, I want this. I am just afraid that I will wake up and discover it was all a dream." Warren reached out and took her hand again, his grip warm and solid. "This is real, Dorothy. I am real. And my proposal is real. And in 1 month, you will be my wife. That is a promise." They stood there on the boardwalk outside the church, holding hands in full view of anyone who cared to look, and Dorothy felt something inside her begin to heal. Maybe her mother had been wrong. Maybe there was room in this harsh territory for a woman who was strong and fierce and willing to fight for her life. Maybe there was room for her. Over the next month, Warren came to visit Dorothy almost every day. Sometimes he brought her small gifts: a length of calico fabric for a new dress, a jar of honey from the ranch, a book of poetry that had belonged to his mother. Other times, he simply sat with her on the porch of the cabin and talked, telling her about the ranch and his plans for the future and the life they would build together. Dorothy learned that Warren was patient and thoughtful, that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh when she least expected it. She learned that he woke before dawn every morning and worked until long after dark, that he knew the name of every cow on his ranch and treated his horses with more gentleness than most men treated their wives. She learned that he had been in love once before, with a girl from Butte who had decided she did not want to be a rancher's wife after all, and had moved to San Francisco to live with relatives. The rejection had hurt him, but it had not made him bitter. If anything, it had made him more careful, more deliberate in his choice of partner. "I do not want someone who will run away when things get hard," he told Dorothy one evening as they watched the sun set over the mountains. "I want someone who will stay and fight. I think you are that person." "I am afraid of letting you down," Dorothy confessed. "I do not know anything about running a large ranch. I've only ever managed this small homestead." You will learn, Warren said confidently, and I will teach you. We will be partners, Dorothy, true partners. I am not looking for a servant or a decoration. I am looking for someone who will stand beside me as an equal. The words were so different from everything Dorothy had been taught about marriage, about a woman's place, about what men wanted and expected. But they resonated with something deep inside her, some part of herself that had always chafed against the narrow confines of what women were supposed to be. I will try my best, she said quietly. I cannot promise to be perfect, but I can promise to try. That is all I ask, Warren said, and he smiled at her in the fading light. As the wedding day approached, Dorothy's mother softened considerably. She helped Dorothy sew a new dress for the ceremony, a simple but elegant gown of cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. She taught her daughter the things she would need to know as a wife, speaking frankly about matters that usually went unspoken. And one night, just a week before the wedding, she sat down with Dorothy at the kitchen table and took her hands. I owe you an apology, Margaret said, her voice rough with emotion. What I said to you that night was cruel and wrong. I was frightened, and I lashed out at you when I should have been comforting you. You are my daughter, and I should have trusted that you would be all right. I should have trusted that any man worth having would see your strength for what it is, a gift, not a curse. Dorothy felt tears spring to her eyes. I was so hurt, Mama. I needed you, and you made me feel like I was ruined. I know, Margaret whispered, and now she was crying too. I know, and I am sorry. I let my own fears cloud my judgment. Your father would have been ashamed of me. He always said you were the strongest person he knew, and he was right. Warren Easton is a lucky man to be getting you. They held each other and cried, and when they finally pulled apart, something between them had shifted and healed. The next week passed in a blur of preparations and final visits from neighbors who wanted to wish Dorothy well. Some of them looked at her with curiosity or speculation, clearly wondering about the hasty engagement, but no one said anything unkind to her face. Sheriff Morrison came by to offer his congratulations and to tell her again that she had done the right thing that day on the road. You are going to make a fine rancher's wife, he said gruffly. Warren Easton is getting himself a hell of a woman. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. Dorothy woke early, her stomach fluttering with nerves and excitement. She bathed carefully, pinned up her hair with trembling fingers, and slipped into the cream-colored dress. When she looked at herself in the small mirror over the washstand, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She looked older somehow, more sure of herself. Her mother helped her into the wagon for the ride into town. And as they rolled down the road toward Deer Lodge, Dorothy thought about how much had changed in just 1 month. She had gone from believing herself to be unmarriageable to preparing to wed a good man who wanted her not despite her flaws but because of her strengths. It felt like a miracle. The church was full when they arrived. It seemed like half the town had turned out for the wedding, curious about the match between the wealthy rancher's son and the poor homesteader's daughter. Dorothy felt their eyes on her as she walked down the aisle on her mother's arm, but she kept her gaze fixed on Warren, who stood at the altar in his best suit, looking at her as if she were the most precious thing he had ever seen. Reverend Patterson performed the ceremony with solemn dignity, his voice ringing out in the small church. Dorothy spoke her vows in a clear, steady voice, promising to love and honor Warren for as long as they both lived. Warren's voice was equally firm as he made the same promises to her. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Warren leaned down and kissed her gently, and the assembled crowd applauded. They signed the marriage registry, and then they were walking back down the aisle together, Warren's hand warm and solid in hers. Outside the church, neighbors threw rice and called out their congratulations. Warren's father, a weathered man in his 60s with kind eyes, embraced Dorothy and welcomed her to the family. "My son has chosen well," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Welcome home, daughter." There was a small reception at the hotel with cake and coffee and good wishes. Dorothy met some of the ranch hands who worked for Warren, burly men with sun-creased faces who treated her with a respect that surprised her. They seemed genuinely pleased that their boss had found a wife, and several of them told her they looked forward to working with her. As the afternoon wore on, Warren and Dorothy finally took their leave. They rode out of town together on Warren's horse, heading north toward the Easton ranch. Dorothy had never been to the ranch before, and as they crested a rise and she got her first look at it, she gasped audibly. The ranch spread out before them like something from a dream. The main house was large and solid, built of timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Behind it stood a massive barn, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals where horses and cattle moved lazily in the late afternoon sun. Beyond that, the land stretched away to the mountains, thousands of acres of grassland dotted with grazing livestock. "This is all yours?" Dorothy breathed, unable to quite believe it. "Ours," Warren corrected gently. "It is ours now, Dorothy. Everything I have is yours as well." He helped her down from the horse and led her inside the house. The interior was spacious and well appointed with real wooden floors and glass windows and furniture that looked like it had been shipped from back east. There was a large kitchen with a cast iron stove, a parlor with comfortable chairs and a fireplace, and upstairs several bedrooms including a large master bedroom with a real bed frame and a feather mattress. "Warren, this is too much," Dorothy said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "I do not deserve all this." "You deserve this and more," Warren said firmly. He came to stand in front of her, taking both her hands in his. "Dorothy, I need you to understand something. I did not marry you out of pity or charity. I married you because I believe you are exactly the partner I need. I believe we can build something remarkable together. But I also need you to know that I will never expect you to be anything other than who you are. You do not have to change yourself to fit into this life. You just have to be you." Dorothy looked up at him, at this man who had appeared in her life at the lowest moment and offered her a future she had never dared to imagine. "I will make you a good wife," she promised. "I will work hard and learn everything I need to know. I will make you proud." "You already make me proud," Warren said softly, and then he kissed her again, longer and deeper this time, and Dorothy felt heat spread through her entire body. That night, in the large bed in the master bedroom, Warren was gentle and patient with her. And patient. He took his time, showing her the pleasures of married life with a tenderness that made her want to weep. When it was over and they lay tangled together in the darkness, Dorothy felt a sense of peace settle over her that she had not felt since before her father died. "Are you all right?" Warren murmured, his hand stroking her hair. "I am more than all right," Dorothy whispered. "I am happy." She felt Warren smile against her temple. "Good. That is all I want. For you to be happy here with me." The first weeks of married life were an adjustment. Dorothy had to learn the rhythms of the ranch, the needs of the animals, the expectations of the hands who worked for Warren. She woke before dawn every morning and worked until long after dark, helping with everything from cooking for the ranch hands to mending fences to breaking horses. It was exhausting work, harder even than running the homestead had been, but it was also deeply satisfying. She was building something, creating something, being part of something larger than herself. Warren was true to his word about treating her as a partner. He consulted her on decisions about the ranch, asked her opinion on which bulls to breed with which cows, taught her how to read the books where they tracked expenses and profits. He introduced her to the other ranchers in the area as his wife and business partner, and if some of them were surprised by how much authority he gave her, they were wise enough not to say so. Dorothy found that she had a natural talent for managing the ranch. She was organized and efficient, good at seeing problems before they became crises and finding practical solutions. She also discovered that she genuinely enjoyed the work, the physicality of it, the way it made her feel strong and capable and necessary. Her mother came to visit a month after the wedding, and Dorothy could see the amazement in Margaret's eyes as she took in the ranch, the house, the obvious respect the ranch hands showed Dorothy. "You have done well for yourself," Margaret said quietly as they sat on the porch drinking coffee. "Better than I ever imagined possible." "Warren is a good man," Dorothy said simply. "He has given me more than I ever hoped for." "He is lucky to have you," her mother corrected. "I can see how hard you work here, how much this place needs you. I was wrong, Dorothy. I was wrong about so many things. You are not damaged or unmarriageable. You are magnificent." Dorothy reached over and squeezed her mother's hand, feeling the last of the hurt from that terrible night finally fade away. "Thank you, Mama. That means everything to me." As autumn turned to winter, Dorothy settled more deeply into her new life. She and Warren developed routines, small rituals that belonged only to them. They would ride out together in the mornings to check on the herds, racing each other across the grasslands until they were both breathless with laughter. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and read aloud to each other, or simply talk about their days and their plans for the future. And at night, in the privacy of their bedroom, they learned each other's bodies with a passion and tenderness that grew stronger with each passing week. Dorothy also began to understand what Warren had meant about needing a strong wife. The winter was harsh that year, with deep snows and bitter cold that tested both humans and animals to their limits. There were nights when Warren had to go out in blizzard conditions to rescue cattle that had gotten trapped in snowdrifts, and Dorothy went with him, working beside him in the howling wind to save as many animals as they could. There were days when pipes froze and had to be thawed, when sick cattle needed to be nursed back to health, when predators threatened the herds and had to be driven off. Through it all, Dorothy never faltered. She worked as hard as any man on the ranch, and the hands came to respect and admire her for it. They started calling her Mrs. Easton with a tone of genuine deference, and more than once Dorothy overheard them telling new hires that the boss's wife was tougher than any man they had ever met. Warren noticed too. One night after a particularly brutal day spent hauling hay out to snowbound cattle, he pulled Dorothy into his arms and held her tight. "I do not know what I would do without you," he murmured into her hair. "You are everything I hoped for and more." "We are partners," Dorothy said, echoing the words he had said to her before they married. "We stand together." "Always," Warren agreed, and kissed her. Spring came eventually, as it always did, and with it came new life. The cattle began to calve, filling the ranch with bawling newborns that needed constant attention. Dorothy threw herself into the work, helping with difficult births, bottle-feeding orphaned calves, ensuring that the mothers and babies were healthy and thriving. It was exhausting work, but she loved it. It was during the spring that Dorothy realized she had not had her monthly courses in some time. At first, she had been too busy to notice, but as weeks passed and her body began to change in small but unmistakable ways, she understood what was happening. She was carrying Warren's child. She waited until she was certain before telling him. One evening after dinner, when they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There's something I need to tell you," she said softly. Warren looked at her, his blue eyes questioning. "What is it?" "I am with child," Dorothy said simply. "We are going to have a baby." She watched the emotions play across Warren's face. Surprise, joy, wonder, and something that looked like awe. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you pleased?" Dorothy asked, suddenly nervous. They had never discussed children, had never talked about when or how many. She had simply assumed that children would come eventually, but now she worried that perhaps it was too soon. "Pleased?" Warren pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Dorothy, I am more than pleased. I am thrilled. You have given me everything I could ever want. A true partner, a real marriage, and now a child. I am the luckiest man in Montana." Dorothy laughed, feeling tears of happiness spill down her cheeks. "I hope I can be a good mother. I do not know anything about babies." "You will learn," Warren said, echoing the words he had said to her before they married. "Just like you learned everything else. And I will be beside you every step of the way." The news of Dorothy's pregnancy spread through the ranch and then through the town, and people were genuinely happy for them. Her mother cried when she heard, tears of joy and relief that her daughter would know the blessings of motherhood. The ranch hands became even more protective of Dorothy, insisting that she not do any heavy lifting or dangerous work. Warren, for his part, hovered over her constantly, worried about every little ache or pain. "I am pregnant. Not made of glass," Dorothy told him one afternoon when he had physically lifted her away from a fence she was trying to mend. "I can still work." "I know you can," Warren said, but there was worry in his eyes. "But I do not want to take any chances. You and the baby are too important to me." Dorothy softened at that. She understood his fear, remembered the story he had told her about his mother dying when he was young. "I will be careful," she promised. "But you have to let me live my life, Warren. I cannot spend the next 6 months sitting in a chair doing nothing." They compromised. Dorothy continued to work on the ranch, but she avoided the most strenuous tasks and took frequent rests. She spent more time in the house, managing the household and the books, and less time out on the range. It chafed at her sometimes, this forced slowness, but she understood that it was necessary. As summer progressed, Dorothy's belly grew round and prominent. She felt the baby move inside her, tiny flutters at first and then stronger kicks and rolls that amazed her. Warren would place his hand on her stomach in the evenings and talk to the baby, telling their unborn child about the ranch and the land and the life they would share. It was during these moments that Dorothy felt most at peace, most certain that she had made the right choice in marrying this man. The baby came in early September, almost exactly 1 year after Dorothy had killed the drifter on the road. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through an entire day and into the night. The doctor from town came out to the ranch, and Dorothy's mother came too to help see her daughter through the ordeal. Warren paced the hallway outside the bedroom, unable to sit still, until finally, just as dawn was breaking, he heard the thin wail of a newborn baby. The doctor emerged from the bedroom looking tired but pleased. "You have a son," he told Warren, "a healthy, strong boy, and your wife came through it just fine. She is asking for you." Warren practically ran into the bedroom. Dorothy was propped up against the pillows, pale and exhausted but smiling, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. She looked up as Warren entered, and her smile widened. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Warren approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the baby in his wife's arms. The child had a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face, and he was the most beautiful thing Warren had ever seen. "He is perfect," Warren whispered, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand. The baby's fingers closed around his father's finger instinctively, and Warren felt his heart swell with more love than he knew he was capable of. "What should we name him?" Dorothy asked, looking up at her husband. Warren thought for a moment, then said quietly, "What about William? It was my grandfather's name. He built this ranch from nothing, and he was one of the strongest men I ever knew. I would like our son to have his name." "William Easton," Dorothy said, testing the name. "I like it. William it is." They spent the next hour simply sitting together, the three of them, marveling at the miracle of new life. When Dorothy's mother finally came in to check on them, she found all three asleep. Dorothy propped against the pillows, Warren curled up beside her on the bed, and baby William tucked safely between them. The first months of William's life were a blur of sleepless nights and constant care. Dorothy threw herself into motherhood with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else, learning how to nurse the baby, how to soothe him when he cried, how to read the subtle signals that told her when he was hungry or tired or uncomfortable. Warren helped as much as he could, walking the floor with William in the middle of the night when Dorothy was too exhausted to move, changing diapers, making bottles when Dorothy's milk was not enough. "I never knew I could love something this much," Warren confessed one night as he held his sleeping son. "It is almost frightening how much I love him." "I know," Dorothy said softly. She understood exactly what he meant. The love she felt for William was fierce and primal, a protective instinct so strong it sometimes took her breath away. She would do anything to keep him safe, to ensure that he grew up healthy and happy and loved. As William grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Warren and Dorothy worked harder than ever, expanding their herd, improving their land, building a reputation as one of the finest cattle operations in the territory. They hired more hands, built new corrals and outbuildings, and started breeding horses as well as cattle. The work was endless, but they thrived on it, taking satisfaction in the visible results of their labor. Dorothy's mother sold the old homestead and moved into a small cottage on the Easton ranch, where she helped care for William and manage the household while Dorothy was out working. The arrangement benefited everyone. Margaret had a comfortable home and the joy of watching her grandson grow, and Dorothy had reliable help that allowed her to continue working alongside Warren. When William was 3 years old, Dorothy became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and when she went into labor, it progressed quickly. Their second child was born just before Christmas, a daughter with Warren's blue eyes and Dorothy's dark hair. They named her Mary, after Warren's mother, and she was adored from the moment she drew her first breath. Life settled into a rhythm. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. William grew into a sturdy, adventurous boy who followed his father everywhere, learning about cattle and horses and the land. Mary was quieter, more thoughtful, but she had a stubborn streak a mile wide and a laugh that could light up the darkest day. Dorothy and Warren watched their children grow with pride and joy, marveling at how blessed they were. One evening when William was 8 and Mary was 5, the family sat together on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set over the mountains. It was a ritual they had maintained over the years, this quiet time together at the end of the day. William was teaching Mary how to whistle, and their laughter filled the air. Warren had his arm around Dorothy's shoulders, and she leaned against him, feeling content and peaceful. "Do you ever think about that day?" Warren asked quietly, his voice pitched low so the children would not hear. "The day I came to propose?" Dorothy was quiet for a moment, remembering. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I think about how lost I felt, how certain I was that my life was over. And then you rode up and offered me a future I had never imagined possible." "I think about it too," Warren said. "I think about how close I came to not going that day. I almost talked myself out of it a dozen times on the ride over, convinced that you would reject me or that I was being foolish. But something kept pushing me forward, some instinct that told me you were the one I was supposed to find." "I am glad you listened to that instinct," Dorothy said, turning to look up at him. "You saved me, Warren. In every way a person can be saved." "You saved me too," Warren said seriously. "I was drowning in loneliness before I met you. Going through the motions of living without really feeling anything, you brought me back to life. You made me whole." They kissed, a soft, lingering kiss that spoke of years of love and partnership and shared struggles overcome. When they pulled apart, they found their children watching them with identical expressions of amused disgust. "Papa, that is gross," William announced, and Mary nodded in solemn agreement. Warren laughed and reached out to ruffle his son's hair. "One day, when you are older, you will understand. Love is not gross, son. It is the best thing in the world." "If you say so," William said skeptically, but he was grinning. As the years passed, the Easton Ranch became one of the most successful operations in Montana. Dorothy and Warren's partnership was legendary in the territory, and other ranchers often sought Dorothy's advice on management and breeding decisions. She became known as a woman who was tough but fair, who could outwork most men and outthink the rest. She never forgot the lessons she had learned that terrible day on the road, the day she had discovered her own strength. She taught those lessons to her children, insisting that they learn to be strong and capable and ready to face whatever challenges life might bring. William grew into a tall, strapping young man who looked like his father but had his mother's fierce determination. He took over more and more of the ranch work as he got older, and it was clear he would be ready to run the operation when his parents were ready to retire. Mary proved to be a gifted horsewoman, and she started a breeding program that produced some of the finest horses in the territory. She was courted by numerous young men, but she turned them all down, declaring that she was in no hurry to marry and wanted to focus on her horses. Dorothy's mother lived to see her grandchildren grown and flourishing. She passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72. Content in the knowledge that her daughter had found happiness and success beyond anything she had imagined possible. Dorothy grieved deeply for her mother, but she also felt a sense of peace. They had made their peace years ago, had healed the rift that had opened between them that terrible night. Margaret had died knowing she was loved and forgiven, and that was a precious gift. Warren's father followed his wife into death 2 years later, leaving the ranch entirely in Warren and Dorothy's hands. They had been running it for years anyway, but the official transfer of ownership felt momentous. They stood together in the lawyer's office in Deer Lodge, signing the papers that made them the sole owners of thousands of acres of prime Montana grassland, and looked at each other with the same sense of wonder they had felt on their wedding day. "We did it," Warren said quietly as they walked out of the lawyer's office. "We built something remarkable." "We did it together," Dorothy corrected, taking his hand. "Everything we have accomplished has been because we worked as partners, as equals. I could not have done any of it without you." "Nor I without you," Warren said, and kissed her there on the main street of Deer Lodge, in front of God and everyone, because he did not care who saw. They were in their 50s when the railroad finally came through Deer Lodge, connecting the isolated Montana town to the rest of the country. It brought changes, some good and some less welcome. Prices for cattle improved because they could ship to distant markets more easily, but it also brought an influx of new people, settlers looking for land, business owners looking for opportunities. The wild frontier that Dorothy and Warren had known all their adult lives was slowly being tamed, civilized, turned into something more settled and predictable. "Do you miss it?" Dorothy asked Warren one evening as they watched a train rumble through town in the distance. "The way things used to be?" Warren considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I miss the freedom of it, the sense that anything was possible. But I do not regret the changes. Progress is inevitable, and fighting it is futile. We have to adapt and move forward." "We have always been good at that," Dorothy said with a small smile. "Adapting and moving forward." "That we have," Warren agreed, pulling her close. "And we will continue to be good at it as long as we are together." As they grew older, Dorothy and Warren gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, letting William take over more responsibility. They remained involved, offering advice and guidance when asked, but they also took time to enjoy the fruits of their labor. They traveled a bit, taking the new railroad to Denver and San Francisco, seeing sights they had only read about. They spent time with their grandchildren, William having married a sensible young woman who reminded Dorothy very much of herself, and Mary finally marrying a horse breeder from Wyoming who understood her passion for the animals. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Warren took Dorothy back to the spot where he had first proposed. The old Novak homestead was long gone, reclaimed by the land, but they stood where the cabin had once been and remembered. "I cannot believe it has been 25 years, Dorothy said, shaking her head in wonder. "It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." "Best decision I ever made," Warren said simply. "Coming here that day, asking you to marry me, it changed everything." "My mother told me no decent man would want me," Dorothy said softly, remembering. "And then you rode up the next day and proved her wrong in the most spectacular way possible. You gave me everything, Warren. A home, a family, a purpose. You gave me a life worth living." "You gave me the same," Warren said, cupping her face in his weathered hands. "You were exactly what I needed, exactly when I needed it. I have loved you every single day of the last 25 years, and I will love you every day for however many years we have left." They kissed there in the ruins of the old homestead, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and built something beautiful together. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and in that moment, everything felt perfect. They lived another 20 years together, watching their grandchildren grow and welcoming great-grandchildren into the family. The ranch continued to prosper under William's management, and the Easton name became synonymous with quality cattle and horses throughout Montana and beyond. Dorothy remained active well into her 70s, still riding out to check on the herds, still offering her sharp insights on breeding and management decisions. Warren slowed down more quickly, his body worn out from decades of hard physical labor, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for his wife never wavered. Warren passed away first, quietly in his sleep at the age of 79. Dorothy held his hand as he drew his last breath, whispering that she loved him, that she would see him again, that their love would transcend even death. The grief nearly crushed her, but she held on, determined to live out the rest of her days with the same strength and determination that had defined her entire life. She lived 3 more years without him, spending her time with her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling stories about the old days, about how she met their grandfather, about the life they had built together. She spoke often of that terrible day when she had killed a man in self-defense, the day that had changed everything. She told her descendants that sometimes the worst moments in life could lead to the best outcomes, that strength and courage were worth more than prettiness or propriety, that love could be found in the most unexpected places if you were brave enough to reach for it. Dorothy passed away in her sleep on a cool September night, exactly 50 years after that terrible and wonderful day that had set her life on its new course. Her children and grandchildren gathered to mourn her and celebrate her, sharing stories of her fierce spirit and unconditional love. They buried her beside Warren on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under a sky so vast and blue it seemed to go on forever. On her gravestone, William had inscribed words that captured the essence of his mother's life. Dorothy Novak Easton, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She was told no decent man would want her. The next day, a decent man proved otherwise. Together, they built an empire of love. And on the ranch that Dorothy and Warren had built, life went on. Cattle grazed on the endless grasslands. Horses ran wild and free in the corrals. Children laughed and played in the shadow of the mountains. The Easton name endured, carried forward by generations who had learned the lessons their remarkable ancestors had taught them. That strength is beautiful, that love conquers all, that partnership and equality make for the strongest foundations, and that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. The story of Dorothy and Warren became legend in Deer Lodge and beyond, told and retold by parents to their children, by grandparents to their grandchildren. It was a story of courage and love, of second chances and new beginnings, of a woman who refused to be broken by tragedy, and a man who saw her strength for the gift it was. It was a story of the Wild West, yes, but more than that, it was a story of the human heart and its infinite capacity for resilience and hope. And if you stand on that hill where Dorothy and Warren are buried, if you close your eyes and listen carefully, you can almost hear the echo of their laughter carried on the Montana wind, a testament to a love that death itself could not diminish. Their story ended, as all stories must, but the love they shared and the life they built together rippled outward through generations, touching countless lives and proving over and over again that sometimes, against all odds, true love really does conquer all. The ranch they built still stands today, still bearing the Easton name, still raising the finest cattle and horses in Montana. And every person who works that land, who rides across those grasslands, who watches the sun set over those mountains, is living proof that what Dorothy and Warren created together was more than just a successful business. It was a legacy of strength and love and partnership that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the power of two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and refused to let anything tear them apart. That is how the story ends, not with tragedy or loss, but with triumph and love, and the knowledge that what they built together would last forever. Dorothy Novak, who was told no decent man would want her, found not just a decent man, but an extraordinary one. Warren Easton, who was searching for a strong partner, found not just strength, but grace and courage and passionate love. Together they proved that the best romances are not the ones that come easily, but the ones that are forged in fire and tempered by adversity. Their love story became the stuff of legend, passed down through 5 generations of Eastons who grew up hearing about their remarkable great-great-grandparents. Every young person in the family learned the story. How Dorothy killed a man in self-defense, how her mother said no decent man would want her, how Warren showed up the very next day to prove otherwise, how they built an empire together through partnership and love. It became a touchstone for the family, a reminder that true love sees strength where others see damage, that the right person will value you for exactly who you are, that courage and determination can overcome any obstacle. And so the story of Dorothy and Warren lived on, not just in the memories of their descendants, but in the very land they had tamed together, in the cattle that bore their brand, in the horses that carried their bloodlines, in the house they had built with their own hands and filled with love and laughter and the sound of children playing. It was a story that proved beyond any doubt that happy endings are possible even in the hardest times, even in the wildest places, even when all hope seems lost. All it takes is courage, love, and 2 people willing to stand together against whatever the world might throw at them.